Alright guys, I've got a lot to get to, so I'm going to get straight into it. I haven't prepared this as much as I usually do, so please bear with me. If it seems a little bit disjointed here and there, I'm going to try my best to keep it as short and cohesive as possible. Starting with the State of the Union, which begins today, the 30th of January. A day to watch, not just for what Donald Trump says, but for the things that may happen on this day. What's interesting for me is these boycotts that are going on with the Democrats not attending the State of the Union address. Now, it's not unusual for some people not to attend the State of the Union address, but we've got Earl Blumenauer, John Lewis, Pramila Jayapal, and we've also got Barbara Lee, Maxine Waters, Frederica Wilson. We've got Skashkowski, Gregory Meeks, Albio Sears, Bobby Rush, and Juan Vargas, and Danny Davis. That's 12 Democrats not attending I think they're all Democrats anyway. 12 Democrats not attending the State of the Union address, which takes place today. They have varying different reasons for not attending. Mostly they don't like Donald Trump. They don't like the things that he says. So they're not going to be attending. But I find it unusual that it was just about 3 days ago there was 5 of them not attending, and now it's jumped from 5 to 12. And I don't know, by the time the State of the Union address actually happens, whether there'll be more Democrats added to that list. Obviously, it's a time of high watch because the State of the Union is a time where all the government officials attend, including all the people in the line of succession for president. They'll have a designated survivor plus these 12 Democrats not attending, so we don't know who the designated survivor is. There is a show called Designated Survivor, and as we see on the TV show, on the day the State of the Union is taking place, a bomb goes off in the Capitol, which kills all those people. Not saying that that's going to happen, but there has been renovations. The State of the Union takes place in the left wing, in the Republican, I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically on the left side of the White House. It's not in the White House, but if you come outside the White House, it's on the left. If some of you are familiar with the owl shape that the White House is in, the place where they're having the State of the Union is on the owl's left wing. So take from that what you will. I just thought I'd report it, and I'm going to be watching closely to see if anything takes place. But that's January the 30th. The speech is not likely to provoke North Korea, as it's coming from one of the US government officials. They're saying that Trump can be expected to talk about North Korea, but his speech will mainly focus on domestic issues and a broader national security. I don't believe that's true. Donald Trump is most likely to go off script, and when he goes off script, all sorts of things can be said and all sorts of things can happen. So we'll pay close attention to that, see what's coming. The day after, the 31st, is the day we have the lunar eclipse, the blood moon, the blue moon, the supermoon, the full moon. It's the trifecta. And this only occurs, well, it hasn't occurred in the last 150 years. That's been reported before, but I thought I'd just reiterate it, let you know how special and unique this event is, to have all of those things happening on the same day. Depending on where you look for news, headlines are calling it a super blue blood moon or a blue blood super moon, and not seen for 150 years, as I've said. It's true that January the 31st is a busy day for lunar. First, there is indeed a total lunar eclipse, the first in nearly 2.5 years, visible anywhere. Those living near the west coast and most everywhere around the Pacific Rim will have the best views. The moon usually takes on a deep red or coppery color during totality, hence the often used term blood moon to describe its appearance. Those of us stuck on the east coast of the US will be challenged to see much of anything, as the moon sinks out of sight in the west as the sun comes up. This event falls on the second full moon of the month, what's often called a blue moon, and third, the eclipse comes just 27 hours after the moon reaches perigee, its closest orbital point to Earth, which is why it's also a supermoon. So there's a lot of things going on with the moon. I pointed out a lot of times before in a lot of previous videos. As the day is tomorrow, I thought I'd mention it again. So we've got State of the Union on the 30th. We've got the blood moon, super moon, blue moon, lunar eclipse on the 31st. And then we go into February. So on February the 4th, we have Superbowl. The Super Bowl I don't usually watch. Sometimes I watch the halftime show for entertainment, but you know, this year I'll probably be watching it for subliminal messaging. We've got the L2. Obviously, there's significance with the L, there's significance with the 2. I'm not going to get into all of that. The other way of looking at it is flipping the L upside down, and you've got a 7. The similar thing goes on with the iPet Goat video. What I noticed is when I was looking at the New England Patriots versus Philadelphia Eagles, I noticed that the New England Patriots shape has a very similar shape to the figures that were identified on the chalkboard a while ago. So these figures here, this same kind of pointed chin and you know, this same kind of shape is the same kind of shape I'm seeing here with the New England Patriots. That same pointed shape, like a horn looks like it's coming out the side there. Obviously that's not a horn, that's a part of the flag waving. But over here they've drawn it as kind of like a horn in the ear. And it's just got similarities with the shape, so I thought I'd just point that out as well. Meaning that the Super Bowl could be indicated in the iPet Goat video in, you know, some strange way. But let's move on. But before we actually do move on fully, I just wanted to pose another thought. That could this be, if this figure does represent Donald Trump, as well as George Bush, then could this be a State of the Union address? We have 12 figures here, 12 blue figures, and we've got 12 Democrats, which are blue, not attending. I don't know if that has any significance, but it was a thought I had, and I just wanted to point it out because I thought, you know, if I'm making videos, interpreting and analysing things, I might as well present everything and not just pick and choose what I feel fits into the scenario. So there's another option for you. On the same day, North Korea and South Korea were supposed to be having some form of peace concert or some sort of performance. North Korea has cancelled this. This was go on February the 4th. They've cancelled, and the reason they've cancelled is saying that the South Korean media has been insulting the hermit state over its planned measures for the upcoming Winter Olympics. And we remember that North Korea is calling for unification of the North and South to join together. They'll be marching under one flag, and again, that could be taking parallels from the iPet Goat video, where we see the girl coming out under her white flag of peace and trying to stop this, you know, potential war that's kicking off here. But she's unable to, because whoever this figure represents, whether that's the figure of death, whether that's, you know, Uncle Sam with the top hat and the diamond ring and the what's supposed to be a pipe, but instead we've got this kind of like party favor, and we've got the cape. It's all sort of like aristocracy that we're seeing in this figure here, and this is the figure that orchestrates the whole death scene when we see him waving his, you know, his wands, orchestrating the death that's going on. That could be an indication of North and South Korea unifying under one flag. America not liking that, because at the end of the day, it's all about trying to get to China and their petro yuan and, you know, the whole oil and power and global dominance and everything like that. That's to be seen. But another thing I just wanted to kind of point out, because it's another thought that I've been having. In separate news, but not unrelated, we have a potential asteroid flying by the Earth. They claim it's not going to be hitting, it's passing about 2.6 million miles from Earth, but it will be zooming past on February the 4th, the same day as the Super Bowl, the same day as North Korea was supposed to be having this concert performance peace thing with South Korea, and which is no longer happening. So, you know, that's just another thing to watch out for. On February the 6th, SpaceX Falcon Heavy launch is expected. This launch has been anticipated for a long time now. They've been talking about it for, you know, months, but now it's finally happening, either on February the 6th or February the 7th. February the 7th is their backup date in case they're unable to launch on February the 6th for whatever reason. But the launch, if it happens, will be like 3 normal SpaceX launches happening simultaneously. So literally 3 SpaceX Falcon boosters will be strapped together. The company says that Falcon Heavy has more lift capacity than any US launch since the last Saturn V in the 1970s. The reason I bring that up is not because it's a historical launch. It's going to be the biggest, it's going to be the brightest launch we've had so far. So expect some sort of spectacle in the sky, as was the case when SpaceX launched their last rocket. It again brings me back to the iPad Goat video, because I'm thinking the rocket on the chalkboard that has 3 droplets coming off of it. In this indication, they're either boosters or sperm drops, as they've indicated it here, giving it a double layer of meaning. But if it is something to do with the SpaceX Falcon Heavy launch, and they've got the 3 boosters that are strapped to this massive rocket, we have a massive rocket over here and what appears to be 3 boosters. So I don't know if that indicates that the launch goes ahead, or if this is part of describing the events along this timeline where a launch could take place. I did think it had parallels to the last launch just because the shape it made was like a sperm shape, but considering it's the biggest rocket, this is a pretty big rocket if you can visualize it as such. And then we've got 3 drops coming off, which could be 3 space boosters or 3 boosters attached to this rocket. It's very possible that the scene in iPad Goat could be giving us points along the timeline to show us that we're on the right timeline and how close we're getting to the actual event. So right now we're still kind of, there's many different layers of meaning. So along this interpretation, we're kind of in the chalkboard where we're seeing the rocket there, and possibly the State of the Union address, these 12 Democrats missing, these 12 blue states missing, and you've got 12 blue figures there. So that I'm just drawing parallels. It may not be proper to do so, but all the ideas are coming out, so I'm just putting them all into this video. And then Trump had a lunch on yesterday with UN Security Council members, and this was talks on North Korea and terrorism. President Trump hosted a lunch at the White House on Monday with the United Nations Security Council, US Ambassador of the UN Nikki Haley, and Secretary of State Rex Tillerson. The president said the group would be discussing the administration's cooperation on a range of security challenges, including the of North Korea, very importantly, countering Iran's destabilizing activities in the Middle East, ending the Syrian conflict, and confronting terrorism. Iran is popping up a lot in the news as well now. Well, in the news that I look at, because it just seems as if they're really going after Iran. Not only are they trying to decertify the JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, by basically Trump saying he's not going to sign it and passing it over to Congress, telling them to come up with a new deal. And as I've said, if Congress do come up with a new deal, there's no way they can get the international community to agree to it. And even if they do, there's no way they're going to get Iran to agree with it. So whether you do it this way or whether you do it that way, it seems that the end of the Iran nuclear deal is on the table. And whether before that happens or after that happens, something involving Iran takes place, I don't know. We've got reports out that they've launched 23 ballistic missiles this year. 4 or 5 out of those 23 missiles were nuclear capable. So they could have been practicing launching nuclear rockets or nuclear missiles without actually having any nuclear tips on those missiles. And then there's rumors about North Korea potentially selling off its nuclear weapons to get money because of the sanctions they're on, and one of those buyers could be Iran. If they do, they can just attach it to one of the rockets they've already tested, and off it goes. So that's another thing to look out for. And then on, this is part of the report that I was just kind of saying. Actually, Trump and his allies are ready to sabotage the Iran deal, and that just goes into more detail about what they're doing in terms of trying to, get rid of this Iran nuclear deal by kind of pretending that they're looking for a new deal, but knowing all along that, one, it will be hard to get the international community to agree to that new deal, and it will be next to impossible to get Iran to agree to it. So it's all for show, basically, to look like you're trying to do something when in actual fact you're doing something else. Alaska, more earthquakes in Alaska, and not just in Alaska, but up and down the west coast. So there's fears that the big one for California is coming, with all these movements that are taking place along the leading edge of the tectonic plate, which meets the North American plate and subducts underneath it. There is a lot going on in terms of these earthquakes. I'll just read a bit of this report. The zones are all on the terrifying Ring of Fire, a system of highly active tectonic plates in the Earth's crust, which are continually crashing into each other, sparking the quakes. Let's scroll down a little bit. You can see this is where the tectonic plate boundary is, and it kind of just loops up there around by Alaska, coming down by California, and we reach like the Mexico area. And obviously Mexico's had their big earthquake before. There could be more coming from Mexico in the next couple of days or weeks, but the main point of focus at the moment is the west coast of the United States, particularly California, which is seeing activity after there was numerous activity up here in Alaska. So if there's movement along here, it generally suggests that the pressure is shifted from one area to another, and where along this tectonic plate the pressure is shifted to is anyone's guess. People can't predict earthquakes. They can't really measure the pressure in the earth, otherwise they'd be able to predict earthquakes. So we're really kind of just left wondering what's going on. But a key thing to look out for is any more quakes that are happening, particularly along this region of Canada and up in the upper region near Washington, Oregon, kind of leading into California. If we see a lot more quakes around the area, then it would indicate that something, it would indicate something possibly big is on its way. And a key reason why they did their great shakeout drill not too long ago. That doesn't coincide with the next story. As I said, I haven't got it all organized in the way I normally would have, but basically if war kicks off with North Korea, we could see the largest ever gold surge in history. So see the prices of gold spike, and obviously gold never actually loses its value. It just seems to keep on increasing. And if we look at the IPEC gold video very quickly, there's numerous indications or numerous pointings to gold. The golden circle here, that could indicate a number of things, but one of the things I have been thinking it indicates is one of the secret societies that isn't very well talked about and doesn't seem to have a lot of information circulating on the internet about them is the Knights of the Golden Circle. And one of the reasons I bring it up is because one of the members of the Golden Circle, John Wilkes Booth, was responsible for shooting Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head. I believe it was Abraham Lincoln or John F. Kennedy, one of the two. They both got shot in the back of the head. So one of them, I think it was Abraham Lincoln. It was Abraham Lincoln. John Wilkes Booth shot him in the back of the head, and he was part of the Knights of the Golden Circle. And it's one of the societies that doesn't really get talked about a lot. We know about the Illuminati and Skull and Crossbones, the Rothschilds, the Bilderbergs. They all get talked about, but the KGC doesn't really. So I just wanted to point that out. If any of you got any more information on the Knights of the Golden Circle, I'd be interested to hear about it. I've tried researching a lot. I can find hardly any information about them, like real information, not just speculation. They apparently disbanded, but as we know with these secret societies, they don't disband, they just go underground and they work their way up from there. So again, indications of gold in terms of gold surge in the story I was just related to. You've got the pound coin down here, which again is gold. If we move along in the video, sorry I'm speaking really fast as well. We've got the golden tooth on this demonic mirror TV type figure. So and he's also got a gold earring as well. I don't know if that's got anything to do with the Knights of the Golden Circle or if that's got anything to do with the potential surge in gold if North Korea and America was to go to war, but I thought I'd just bring it up because, again, it's an idea that I'm having and I'm presenting them all. Whether they make complete sense or not, I think it's important to get all the different analysis, all the different interpretations out there so that they can be, analyzed, and you can take what makes more sense and leave behind what doesn't make any sense at all. But unless you have everything in front of you, you can't make a fully comprehensive review of it all. Excuse me. South Korea accuses Chinese military plane of entering air defense zone without. As I said, China have been pushing themselves on the global stage, and they have been stepping up more in terms of military, especially in the South China Sea and around the Asian Peninsula. I think their goal is to obviously drive the US out of the area. Similar goal for Iran, to drive the US out of the area in terms of the Middle East. We'll see what happens in relation to all of this going on, but the fact that there was a reported nuclear submarine near the Hokkaido Islands in Japan, and now we've got a Chinese military aircraft entering this zone, which is basically Japan's airspace, without permission, kind of says to me that China is not only pushing itself out there on the stage militarily wise, but it's probing the defenses of these different countries in anticipation of taking them over, I guess, is what their plan is. So we'll see what happens in terms of China and Japan, South Korea, and the entire Asian Peninsula. But it appears that if Iran's trying to take over the Middle East, as Israel is accusing them of, and China's trying to take over the Asian Peninsula, then it only makes sense that Russia's trying to take over the Baltics and the NATO states. So, those three countries are really trying to lock down their area, and we could say that's an aggressive move, potentially causing war, or we could say it's a defensive move, again, potentially causing war. Either way, it seems like war is on the table and we can't escape it, no matter what steps we take. So the best thing to do is just be prepared and stay alert. The US forces are practicing cyber attacks to counter North Korean threat. Now, this is important because the US just kind of updated its responses to cyber attacks to include nuclear response. My fears here are if the US decides to false flag itself in terms of a cyber attack and attack its own electric grid, it could then blame any country it really wanted to, but most likely it would be North Korea. As I said, they blame North Korea for the WannaCry attack, they blame North Korea for the ransomware attack. So that would probably be a response they give. And that response could now be, a nuclear response. So while they're practicing to defend against North Korean threats, it's more likely that they'll present a false flag, which then will be blamed on North Korea, so that they can go in and conduct their bloody nose strike or strategic nuclear attack, or even use an updated version of the bomb they used in Pakistan, which is the mother of all bombs. It's a non-nuclear bomb, but considering its damage that it causes, it might as well be. Apart from it hasn't got any radiation, so I guess that's one of the good things about it. The final version of the GBU-57 bomb has been produced and weighs about 13 tons. The goal of modernization is to raise the bomb's ability to destroy armored targets and underground caches. The spokeswoman said the devastating bomb could only be dropped from bombers, which is interesting because we know that the US has just sent B-2 bombers over to Guam, along with the B-52 Stratofortress, and they're sitting there waiting for command. Another report I read said that they were getting ready for mobilization on the 4th or 6th of February. I can't remember which one. It's in one of my previous videos, so you can go back and watch that if you like. Up to you. But the report is true. On the February the 4th or February the 6th, the US will be kind of getting itself into mobilization ready status, and with this mother of all bombs, which can only be dropped from the B-2, which is one of the planes they've sent over to Guam, it seems very likely that this device may be used in the event they decide to go ahead and attack North Korea, whether that's for a false cyber attack or a real cyber attack or a false nuclear attack or a real nuclear attack or some sort of provocation. As we've already noted, on February the 8th, North Korea will be going ahead and doing a massive, significant, as they called it, event to mark their military founding, which is usually celebrated on April the 25th. So we'll see what happens coming up. As I believe, I think we're in the timeline. We've been in it for a while now, at least since the turn of this year, 2018, and things are just ramping up. And if those little indicators that I pointed out, like the SpaceX launch and the State of the Union address, are markers that we can look out for to see how far along the timeline we are going, then we're almost there. If not, and they're just things that I've pointed out because they've drawn similarities to what I'm reading, then again, we're still not far away, 1 to 2 months at the most. But my primary focus is on this month because that's where my mind's leading me. If I'm wrong, then reanalyze, compose, and go again. So North Korea, I found this interesting that they sent an open letter to the International Criminal Court, and I didn't read all the letter, but I read some of it, and I think it's interesting, so I'm going to read a portion of it for you. Dear Madam Prosecutor, threats of genocide made against the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. We the undersigned share the desire of the Canadian people to establish and preserve peace in the world. It is therefore necessary for us to ask you to open and investigate. Sorry, do that again. It is therefore necessary for us to ask you to open an investigative file on the action of governments allied to the United States, including Canada, its government ministers and officials active in the ongoing with the DPRK. Embarrassment and shock at President Trump's threats against North Korea have been widespread and have led to a serious discussion in the US as to whether Mr. Trump is mentally fit to govern. However, the threats of Mr. Trump and his Secretary of Defense go well beyond the US domestic sphere and have direct implications for other countries, including Canada. Article 6 of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court states that genocide means any of the following acts committed with intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnical, racial or religious group. A. Killing members of the group. B. Causing serious bodily or mental harm to members of the group. C. Deliberately inflicting on the group conditions of life calculated to bring about the physical destruction in whole or in part of the group. Conspiracy to commit genocide is understood in international law as a concerted agreement to commit genocide which may be inferred from the conduct of the conspirators. The evidence to support the charge of genocide can be based on circumstantial evidence as well as direct evidence. Further, the concerted or coordinated action of a group of individuals can constitute evidence of an agreement. They go into a few examples. On August 8, 2017, Mr. Trump said that North Korean threats will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. His Secretary of Defense, James Mattis, followed up on August 9th with the statement that the DPRK should cease any consideration of actions that would lead to the end of its regime and the destruction of its people. Mr. Mattis added a further comment on September the 3rd. We are not looking to the total annihilation of a country, namely North Korea, but as I said, we have many options to do so. During his maiden speech to the UN General Assembly on September the 19th, Mr. Trump said the United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Finally, US Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, during an interview on January 17, 2018, at Stanford University with Condoleezza Rice, stated approvingly in reference to deaths aboard Korean fishing boats going out to sea in winter without necessary fuel. They, the North Koreans, are feeling the effect of our sanctions. This is direct evidence that the United States is intentionally creating conditions that will cause the death of Korean civilians on a large scale in order to achieve US objectives. And that's where I'm going to stop. The letter goes on. Some more, you can find it online if you type in North Korean open letter to the criminal court. But I found that very interesting. It was it was just eye-opening, for one, to see how this talk about destroying North Korea has been overlooked as a genocide, which it potentially would be. I mean, the North Koreans and the South Koreans are one people, but since the Korean War, they've been divided into North and South Korea, essentially two separate peoples. Then if you're looking at destroying North Korea, saying things such as they'll be met with fire and fury, the whole country will be destroyed and things like that, that is essentially genocide, which is illegal internationally. So I don't expect that the criminal court will actually put any action forward on this letter, but it's kind of important that it was sent. It shows an underlying reason for the North Koreans to have these nuclear weapons, to potentially launch a preemptive strike, or to respond with a nuclear response. So it kind of just lays the groundwork for them to kind of either preemptively respond or, respond after the fact. Very interesting, something to keep your eyes on. See if this International Criminal Court has any response to this letter that was sent by North Korea. But again, something to keep your eyes on. The other thing to keep your eyes on is this promotion of Kim Jong-un's younger sister to a controlling part of the North Korean state security. Obviously, that brings me back to the same scene I see in the iPad Goat video, where we're looking at whoever this person is. But if it does represent Korea, one thing I've discovered is the tiger on the back doesn't just represent South Korea, it represents people. So that includes North Korea, that's North and South Korea, unified under one flag at a time where the dividing lines between South Korea and North Korea could potentially disappear. I don't know if something happens to Kim Jong-un, if his sister then steps in and tries to, stop things from happening, but by then it's too late. But I found it interesting that his younger sister has, been part of the nation's powerful state security, and she's following in the footsteps of her aunt, who used to advise Kim Jong-un's father. So I just wanted to point out, I haven't really got much analysis on that particular point, but I found it interesting because she's the only kind of girl figure that has arisen in the news lately. And if this girl figure comes out, she's not just any old person, but is actually someone who is a representative of one of these countries that are involved, then it could potentially be Kim Jong-un's younger sister running out at the time when North Korea and South Korea could potentially be unified, as Kim Jong-un is calling for, but things not quite happening because war kicks off between China and the US, or whoever this figure of death is supposed to represent. So that's the end of my video. Hope it wasn't too long. I hope it was as cohesive and constructive as I could possibly make it without actually making it that way. There's a lot of news in there to cover. Important things to take note of is the State of the Union address later on today, the lunar eclipse that comes the next day on February the 4th, the asteroid flyby, the Superbowl, the peace celebration thing that they were supposed to be doing, but it's been cancelled. Possible military mobilization on February the 4th, followed by the SpaceX launch on February the 6th. And then this whole massive significant event that North Korea had planned for February the 8th. And that into the opening ceremony, which is on February the 9th for the Winter Olympics. And from there, we don't know. I don't know. But You guys have a good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and God bless.